I ran the math on this. Get ready. Less than 3% of women mentioned penis size. When it came to the men who were good in bed, 0% mentioned the man having a good body. Less than 5% talked about him staying hard. 0% talked about how much money he made, the kind of car he drove, etc., the outer trappings. But what a lot of them talked about was he built up the anticipation. So, for example, we're talking about arousal for 45 minutes. If you come up behind your woman in the kitchen and like squeeze her butt a little bit and like kiss her neck and then walk away, right? Well, now she might be a little aroused. Or if you give her a really good compliment and you're looking in her eyes and you're grounded and you're present when you say it, you look great in those jeans. Oh, well, now her little neurons are going to be firing.
Melanie is a relationship coach for men and couples and a sex researcher with a master's degree from Stanford University. She hosts the popular podcast, Dear Men, How to Rock Sex, Dating, and Relationships with Women. And that's the podcast I've been on a couple of times with you. Now, I took something off of something I read on your website. And I'm going to read this as maybe not so much your bio, but an introduction. You write, I'm quoting you, I'm on a mission to make it easier for men to learn about how to please real women in bed. Not only because it's a lot more pleasurable for us women than what's happening, than when that's happening, but because I want men to get what they want. I want them to have lit up, turned on, radiant women in their lives. I want them to be able to sexually satisfy women such that women are begging them for sex. And there's guys out there going, what world does that happen in? But I can attest, since I got divorced in my late 40s, every woman I've been with, including the woman I've been married to for 8 years, have all wanted more sex than me. They, I hate to say it, but they begged and you know, until they get their pride back, and then they just whine. So, Melanie, what inspired you to become a sexologist? What was
Oh,
that
that's,
about?
by the way, your version of my bio was better than my version of my bio. I was much
Well,
more compelling.
I still read that you wrote that. So, I mean, I'm still reading something you wrote. So,
Right. But that was more juicy than what I picked. So
all
thanks.
right.
Thanks for doing that. Um, yeah, so I am a sex researcher, and actually, my path is that I worked at an org to stop sexual abuse in my 20s. And that was primarily actually in the Orthodox Jewish community. And we were mostly working with boys and young men. And that was most of my background. So I worked in sexual abuse, and then I realized that we're only going to be able to tackle that issue if we establish a healthy sexual culture overall, right? We need to
Mhm.
be talking about it. It needs to be more open. We all need to be just more open in general. Otherwise, it tends to get relegated to secrecy, and in the dark, things fester. So that's my background. And I am a passionate advocate for survivors of sexual abuse and all of the thriving that can happen on the other side of that. I think we only ever hear about that in terms of victimization, but actually, I think you can come out even stronger and have an even better sex life as a survivor. And I'm, again, including men and women in that demographic, because I think a lot of times we only hear about women, but there's a lot of men that are survivors too. So I know that's not, maybe the sexiest way to get started, but that was my path, and I became really passionate about it. And then I had a lot of curiosity myself, and I kind of went along with that for my research.
Okay. Yeah. As a marriage and family therapist, for 40 years, um, yeah, I've listened to a lot of stories from men and women both. And it seems like a lot of the work I've done, whether it's with married people, single people, sex is always, in the middle of what's kind of going on in their lives. We're sexual creatures. We're all about sex. And I often say that we're all bound to get messed up sexually. We live in a very puritanical world It's easy to say it's just Western culture, but I think Eastern culture is maybe even more repressed than even Western culture. So we still, have all these taboos around sex. I grew up fundamental Christian. Basically, the message was sex is dirty, evil, and sinful. So save it for the one you love. So what led you to going from art? You're working with people around sexual abuse issues. What led you to start doing sexual research and asking people about their sex lives?
Yeah, so I'm a writer and I publish online in various places. And I basically just wanted to satisfy some of my own curiosity. I don't know if any of you have heard of the term me searcher, but researchers who are focused on something they're curious about sometimes call themselves me searchers. That would be me. And one of the research questions that I was interested in was how many men are good in bed? Because I was, a sexually active woman. I had a lot of experiences with men, and I was curious about whether my experience was unique or whether other women were having a similar experience. And that was one of my primary research articles. And I was also interested in kind of like both sexes, all sexes, really. Everyone responded to my research. I got over 3,000 participants to my research. I was also interested in what are your top three sex problems? What are your top three dating problems? What are your top three relationship problems? So I got a bunch of data from all of those surveys and I parsed all of the data. And then I kind of went from there in terms of where my curiosity went. But the research results were very interesting. And I think that one of the things that inspires me is the compassion that's available when we hear each other's stories. Because
Hmm.
there's, I think, especially for hetero folks or folks who are having sex with the opposite gender, because we're not having the same lived experience in the world, it's just inherently harder to understand the other side. And then when you add hurt and trauma onto that, there can be like I call it a divide. There's often a divide that will show up in the research, which I can get to, but it's sort of like I only understand my side and I don't really understand your side, and vice versa. And I've found that the more compassion that's brought in and the more light, like we're talking about, bringing the light of knowledge and the light of understanding helps a lot. So I can share some of my research findings if that's interesting, because I think some of them
I
are
I
pretty
would
eye-opening.
love that. A certain percentage of your female respondents to some certain research, I'll put this out there and then I want to hear more of what you found, basically said only about 10% of men are good in bed. So in other words,
Yes.
you're saying the majority of us, 90%, are either clumsy or lazy lovers. We're not very good at it.
I wouldn't say lazy. That lazy was not a word that showed up in the research, but
Just
I would,
clumsy then.
yeah, maybe clumsy. I think that the one of the things I really want to impress upon all of you listening is that the bar is very low, and that's good for you because it means,
Meaning women don't have very high expectations of us?
well, it what I mean is, um, okay, I'm just gonna get into some of it. So when I asked men and women, what are your top three problems in when it comes to sex? What a lot of men said was, I'm hungry. I need more. The word more came up a lot. I need more. I'm not getting enough. And these were both men that weren't in relationships and men that were in relationships. And then another thing that came up a lot was, I feel like I'm always the one initiating. If I don't, we won't. That was one of the research quotes. So there's this experience of kind of hunger and lack on the men's side. And I got research respondents across the board, but for the purposes of this, I'm going to be talking mostly about men who have sex with women and women who have sex with men. So on women's side, the number two problem was trouble orgasming. I have trouble coming to orgasm. I have trouble climaxing. The number one problem for women was pain. And when I say pain, I don't just mean pain during intercourse, which is what a lot of people think of when we think of pain during sex. I feel like when we say the word sex, sometimes we mean the word intercourse, but sex is really broader than that. It's not just intercourse. So, and this was part of the reason I wanted to do the research was because I had had so many sexual experiences with men where it didn't feel good. it actually hurt. And when I say it hurt, for example, the way that he was touching me with his hands. I mean, we use the word fingering. To me, that almost sounds a little bit violent. Like fingering, it feels like jabbing, which was, by the way, a big word that a lot of the women talked about in my research. When I did the actual survey for this, I asked them, what are the top three things men did that were not good in bed? And what are the top three things that men were good in bed? What did they do? So I had the contrast, right? And I think the pain thing is a big deal for two reasons. One, because if you're not experiencing pleasure, if it actually hurts to do something, you're probably going to want to do it less, right? You're going to want to do
And
it
you're going to
less.
be all tight, and that's going to even make things worse. You want to be open and relaxed.
Yes, exactly. And then the other reason that that's important is that it's actually pretty fixable. It's actually pretty fixable. It's very
That's good
doable.
news.
And what's interesting is that when it comes to sex and communication, I think that we have a lot of like when I did the research, one of the things that I asked was, with no sugarcoating, what do you wish you could have told a previous partner about the sex? So this is a little bit of a confessional, right? It's like, no sugarcoating. You don't have to make it pretty. Just tell me. And it's anonymous, right? It's an anonymous survey on the internet. There's no reason for people to lie. And here's what happened. A lot of the men said things like this. I need her to tell me what she likes, what she needs. Tell me what feels good and what doesn't. What am I doing wrong? Show me how to do it right or how you like it. Take my hand, take my penis, show me. What am I doing? Tell me while I'm having sex with you so that I won't stop or move. And then what do you think the women were saying? So this is, what do you wish you could have told a previous partner about the sex? They said, about my likes and needs. Basically, everything that are my needs. How I wanted to be touched or how to touch. Be more specific about what I want and, more important, what I don't. How to please me. And this was interesting because for any of you out there that do research, you probably know that one of the most interesting things about research is the emergence factor, right? Things that emerge that you didn't expect. So maybe you had a hypothesis, maybe you didn't. But this was a very obvious divide between these two populations. One side, the women were saying, I wish I could tell you what I need. And the other side is like, I wish you could tell me what you need. Like, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm just like hoping what I'm doing is working. I don't really know. You're kind of hard to read. I'm not really sure. And what I do in my work is I help men invite her forward, invite her to share, invite her in. Because what I think there's this sort of like assumption, oh, well, the solution to this is really easy. Women should speak up. Women should just speak up more, right? Women should just, well, if it hurts, she'll tell me. I can tell you as a sex researcher, she won't tell you. It's actually really likely that she will just
Why,
grin
why,
and
why is that? Why would the woman not say, I don't like that, please stop?
yeah, so I have the research on this, Robert. Um,
Why is it? Tell us.
basically they're afraid. And this was me. So I had countless, I have a whole talk on this and we can't go into all the details, but I tell my own personal story about this. But there are basically four reasons why it's so scary. It's so hard for a woman to speak up about either it working or not working. It can be either or, but it's harder to speak up when it hurts, when it's not working. And one of them is I was afraid if I said, oh, that hurts, I would like you to do it, with less pressure with your fingers. I was afraid he would say, oh, you don't like how I do it? Well, fuck you then. I don't have to do it at all.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
I
pretty
was
all or
really afraid.
nothing.
And a lot of women said that. But what more women said was, I'm afraid he'll withdraw, right? If he feels criticized or something isn't feeling good for him that he hears from me, he'll just slowly back
Men
away.
men never do that. Men never pull away and pout and then punish you because we perceive you criticized us. So that probably just has to happen once or twice to a woman and she goes, I won't say anything.
Yes. And it doesn't even have to happen about something sexual, right? That's kind of what I thought was interesting about the subject was when I asked people, both sexes, when I said, because one of my questions was, if something wasn't working for you during sex, did you speak up? If not, why not? And a lot of people said, no, I didn't speak up. And when they were asked about why, they said, well, I didn't want to hurt his feelings.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hurt her feelings. And these deeper reasons that I'm going over now are what underlie that, right? Most people come in with, I didn't want to hurt their feelings. But if you ask them why, what would happen if you hurt their feelings? There are these underlying fears. So one, she's afraid that she'll be attacked. Two, she's afraid that you'll just withdraw and she'll lose you. She'll lose the relationship. She'll lose, the stakes are high, especially if she likes you, right? You're actually sometimes less likely to get the truth unless you're inviting it out, which we'll get to. For her to speak up, that's a huge risk on her part. She doesn't want to lose you. She doesn't want to lose the connection. And the third reason is that she has been told that she's broken. That was a word that came up a lot on the women's side that didn't come up on the men's side. A lot of women are concerned that they're broken. Again, we come back to trouble orgasming. Maybe they've never been able to orgasm with a partner. They don't know why, or they feel like they don't like sex. Maybe they have sexual trauma that's not been healed. They feel like they're broken. So they're afraid that's going to come up. And then the last reason is actually not about something bad. It's more about wanting to keep your respect. So there was a really interesting quote in the research about this woman said, I find it a lot easier to speak up with a fling than a relationship partner because I don't care what my fling thinks of me, and I don't want my relationship partner to think I'm a trashy whore. So if there's something that she wants or something that she likes, she's afraid to tell you because she wants to keep your respect. And we come back to that puritanical thing that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I had many experiences in my life of feeling like I could either have a man's respect or I could have sex.
And
And that
what is
was really true, but I felt like it was true. And I have a compelling example once. I chose not to hook up with a guy, and I heard him talking to my housemates later, and he said, Mel is a lady. Mel is a lady. And I thought to myself, he said that because I chose not to have sex with him last night. And that reinforced the belief in me, the programming, if I have sex with a man, he'll lose respect for me. So there's a lot of complexity, but the bottom line is that it's really hard for women to cross the divide. That's what I call it, that divide. It's really hard for women to cross the divide. We need your help to come across and kind of invite us forward and bring us over, because it's very scary.
couple of observations and thoughts. One is, I won't go too deep in this, but it really reflects what you just said, that I found working with a lot of men around sexuality, without going too deep, I do really think the Oedipal complex has a lot of truth to it. The boys go through phases of wanting to possess their mothers, and they wanting, mother to think that they're, great. So boys, like, at some stage will go, grab mommy's breast or dance around with her pee-pee or grab mom's butt. And depending on how mom responds to that, boys often internalize basically the Madonna whore syndrome, that good women don't like sex. That you hide your sex from good women. You only bring your sex to the bad women. And how that often plays out is men will go look at porn. They might go to massage parlors. They might pick up hookers, and there they'll go be sex. But with a woman they really like, that they might think they want, I got to impress her. She's a good woman. I know, I'll hide my sexuality from her. And then like, if the woman's trying to be the good girl as well, all of a sudden that can't go well.
Yeah.
So the other piece, and I'm going to give a talk on this at our conference in Playa del Carmen, of, I call it, how to drive a sexual Ferrari. And my just from an evolutionary biology kind of way, women are the most sexually evolved creatures on the planet. But we men have tend to make sex costly for you in various ways. And I say that women are sexual Ferraris, men are sexual mopeds. For a man, if we just can find a hole to stick our dick in and ejaculate, we go, that was good. Was that good for you? Doesn't matter what hole. It could be a tree stump. It could be a sheep. It doesn't matter. Men do that. But women aren't like that. We're poking you. We're putting things into your body. We're putting our parts in your parts. And as you say, it can be painful. It can be invasive. It can be traumatic. It can be abusive. And so one of the things I do with men is try to help them understand just the complexity, the beautiful complexity of female sexuality, all the parts on your body that can trigger orgasm, your varied and expansive fantasy life that we men don't come anywhere close to. And so there's one piece is understanding you better. But it sounds like you've got some information that can help us grow from just being sexual mopeds, one dimensional, stick our dick in a hole, ejaculate, and call that sex. So you found some things that are actually help men show up in less mopedish ways with women to give women more pleasure, and women want to keep coming back when they get pleasure. So tell us more about that. Every guy listening to this, what are some takeaways that they can take to the bedroom? Somebody said they wanted to find the bedroom. All right, give us some takeaways.
Well, also, I briefly also wanted to say that I do feel like safety is just as important to men as it is to women, and I mean in a sexual context. I've worked with men for over a decade now, and I think one of the main things that I've taken away from that is that many of my clients have said, yeah, I can't have sex unless I feel connected to the woman I'm with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not
Yeah.
even getting hard. I need to feel connected to her to get aroused, and I need to feel safe in order to actually have great sex. So I think that's important to normalize, because I do think that there's a way that our culture kind of denigrates men or says they only want sex, or they only want one thing, or they're, pigs or dogs or things like that. That has not been my experience with the vast majority of men that I've worked with. And I think it's a disservice that we do to men to kind of say, well, safety is only important to women. No, safety is important to
Yeah.
both. It's going to
Yeah.
look and feel different, right? Feeling accepted is going to look and feel different. Physical safety is going to look and feel different, but safety is just as important, and emotional safety is part of safety. Um, so yeah, that's important. One thing I appreciated that you said was about, women wanting to feel, well, you didn't phrase it like this, but you said the sort of like idea of tucking away your sexuality, right? So some men
Yeah.
will be, well, that's threatening, so I'm just gonna like tuck it over here. She's not gonna want that. It's too much. It's too much.
And then,
I
then the
just
men can't figure out why they end up in the friend zone. Well, they've
Yes,
hidden their sexuality. The woman thinks, oh, he just wants to be friends.
yes. And I wanted to touch on that. Two things. One, so I call it sort of like the order of operations. When it comes to arousal, there are different studies and statistics on this, so don't take this with a grain of salt. But according to the research that I've read, it takes a woman, a female body, it takes a woman about 45 minutes to come to full physiological arousal. That means all systems go, everything's happening, all the blood flows in the right place. She is like really ready. 45
Ferrari.
minutes. Ferrari. It takes a man about 7 minutes to come to full physiological arousal. Like, he is like raring, he's ready to go. We can see a disparity there. Yes, there's a
Yeah.
disparity. She takes about 4 times longer to come to full arousal. Now, the average sexual encounter is about 20 minutes. So most of the time, she's not even really fully aroused during a sexual encounter. And that's okay. She doesn't have to be fully aroused every single time that you have sex. The point is that you want to ramp up, right? You want to start slow and ramp up. You want to ramp up. So the problem is not necessarily the way that men are touching women. I'm just going to use hands and fingers as my example, because that's a frequent one, as, foreplay type thing. You want to start way slower, way more soft, way more gentle than you ever have in your life to generate arousal in most women, most female bodies. That means touching her over her clothes, right? A lot of guys will just like rip off the clothes right away and do it like it looks in porn. And I can't tell you how many porn videos I've watched and cringed and thought, oh my God, ow. And it's not that that touch isn't wanted, it's that it's not wanted right away, right? You want to build the fire, right? You got to get the kindling before you do the logs. Let's start with the logs because it's not going to light. So that's one of the biggest things I kind of want to impress upon everyone, is that you want to
Go
start slow.
slower, warm
Or,
up,
and so
softer, more gentle. Yeah.
I teach a course on this called Please Her in Bed. And one of the things that I do is I take, those word clouds. So I took all the
Oh, yeah.
data, the
Like in a
responses from
cartoon. Yeah.
yes, and the ones that are mentioned over and over are really big. So for the ones about the men who were not good in bed, hard and fast were big, right? So fingering me too hard. fingering me too fast, using his hands too hard. What is it? I have these quotes. Jabbing me like they are stabbing me was one woman's response. Driving in too soon, it hurts when you're not ready and things aren't wet enough. I mean, we're all familiar with that. But the slow to start and then ramping up, that's one thing. And then the other thing, and I talk about this in my course, is how to set the stage, how to lead as a man in bed. And what I mean by that is basically saying out loud, I really want this to feel good for you. I always want to know if something doesn't feel good or hurts, to kind of like front load it, since we know this is women's top sex problem, to just say out loud, I really want this to feel good for you. I always want to know if something hurts or doesn't feel good. And by the way, I don't know how many men on the call are in relationships, but that's true no matter how long you've been in a relationship. Because there are women
Because
who,
things can change, right?
yes, there are women who've been in marriages for 20 years and haven't told their partners something hurts. And our bodies change over the course of our cycles and then over the course of our lives, right? As we go into perimenopause and menopause. So sometimes there are guys that are like, I just want the playbook. Just tell me what works and I'll do that again and again. And it's like, there is no playbook. It's like, it's
Can you even address that doing it again and again? Because this is the other thing I've heard from women. Because guys, we want to figure out how the machine runs, line up the ones and zeros, make it run, and then it'll keep running that way, right? For always. And I know that women tell me these things that like their partner will do something that arouses them. And the guy's paying attention. Oh, that aroused her. That got her off. That nipple twist or that thing there. That. And then guys keep going back to the same well over and over and over again. That worked last time. I'll do that again next time. But that's like a woman wearing the same nail polish, 2 weeks in a row, or the same outfit to work 2 days in a row. No, no, you're not going to do that. But we men, we can wear the same shirt day after day. This is only the third day I've had this shirt on. We can do that. Women can't. And so, actually, I tell guys sometimes the worst thing we can do is to try to be a good lover by doing the things we thought worked last time and assuming it should work this time. So, what advice would you give to men around that?
yes. So sometimes it will work again. And I think the nipple twist is actually a perfect example because women that are women that are still menstruating are going to be very, very sensitive about 3 to 5 days before their cycle. So, my breasts are much, much more sensitive at that point in my cycle. So if the nipple twist worked last week and that's tried this week, it might hurt. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not about perfection. Openness is more important than perfection. Being open to feedback, asking for feedback, and setting the stage beforehand, meaning setting it up like, I really want this to feel good for you. I always want to know if something hurts or doesn't work. And I always also want to know if things feel good. Like, I want to know that. One of the things I also train men on is the sex debrief, like having the sex debrief after the encounter so that you can get some more feedback that she might not have wanted to give in the moment. And that's about things that worked in addition to things that maybe didn't feel as good. So I think you can try the same things that you tried. Just know that you didn't do anything wrong if something ever hurts her. I think there's a lot of trepidation around like, I never want to hurt her. I don't ever want to hurt her. And I think for me, it's actually much more important that you're just open and trying things. And sometimes something might hurt a little bit and I might say, ow, and then we move past it. It's not about being perfect, because I think that's something I've definitely seen in a lot of the nice guys that I've worked with is perfection, right? Trying to get it right, trying to get it perfect
Yeah.
rather than accepting from the get-go. Sometimes I'm going to fuck some things up and then we're going to talk about it and we're going to repair and then we're going to move on. And that's part of the package of relating rather than I'm going to try to get everything perfect so that there's never something wrong, right? It's kind of a mindset shift of understanding like, yeah, this is part of the deal. And I've had really good sex with men that where part of it hurt a little bit. And I was like, oh, can you go lighter? Can you be more
Yeah.
gentle? Which is something I've had to learn to do, right? To speak up and to build trust with the men that I'm sleeping with, that they won't attack me or shame me or withdraw if I actually say I need it a little lighter. And one of the interesting things, by the way, is that when I asked women about, have you ever spoken up? If not, why not? That kind of thing. many of the women said things like, yeah, I tried, I tried once or twice and then I gave up. And because of what a lot of women experienced was they would say, oh, I would love that to be a little bit lighter, like less pressure. And then he adjusted for about 2 minutes and then he went back to the way that he'd always done it.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot as well. As
Yes.
if almost the men just didn't pay attention, and because of what I found for a lot of time with men in that situation, they're attached to some outcome. They're trying to get it to some goal that they've had this preconceived fantasy about, or they've seen it done that way in pornography, or they don't pay attention and they just will keep going back. And again, it can be confusing for us guys because you mentioned a woman taking 45 minutes to get fully aroused. And, as I got, out in the dating world in my late 40s and 50s and started having sex with a lot more women than I'd had in the first 45 years of my life, just a lot of women gave me a lot of feedback that was really good. Like on the dance floor, women gave me feedback about how they like to be led and in bed as well. And they'd say things like, "I love it when you pull my hair." My wife, bless her, would just take my hand and put it up underneath her hair and say, "Now pull," right? Or she'd say, "Spank me." But I had to learn what the word for that was in Spanish before oh, that's what you're asking for. But even then, pulling her hair or spanking her can be hurtful and painful if she's not already on that path to being warmed up and aroused. So even the woman who likes a good smack on the ass doesn't want the good smack on the ass, you know, before she's even started to get aroused. Now, later on, so if she said, "Ow, that hurt," now the guy thinks, "I'll never do that again." But then, 12 and a half minutes later, she's wanting the smack on the ass. And the guy's confused now. I don't know what to do. I did it wrong. And then now that. So you never run into that, do you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because in my course, one of the things I talk about is thinking about women like cars. So, and I'm putting Teslas aside because yeah, like electric vehicles aside, all cars have spark plugs, all cars have transmissions, right? All cars have the same parts, but every car is a little bit different, right? This one pulls to the left, this one does something weird in reverse, this one's windshield wipers don't work. Women are kind of like that. And I think as men get to know their car, there are going to be certain things that they get to know, right? So it's more of a process of getting to know the
Yeah.
generalities and then accepting that even with those generalities, sometimes she's going to be at a certain place in her cycle or a certain place in her life cycle, and something that used to work won't work, but new things will work. So thinking of it more as an adventure and an exploration rather than I'm trying to figure out the playbook so that I can just do the playbook every time.
Yeah.
In our coaching work, a lot of what Jason and I focus on is presence, deep presence, and being really present with the woman during sex. That's what she really craves. I mean, that's what shows up in the research. And I did want to share something important about what women talk about and what they don't talk about when it comes to men who are good in bed. I ran the math on this. Get ready. Less than 3% of women mentioned penis size. When it came to the men who were good in bed, 97% did not talk about penis size. 0% mentioned the man having a good body. Less than 5% talked about him staying hard. 95% did not talk about him staying hard. That was not important. 0% talked about how much money he made, the kind of car he drove, etc., the outer trappings. But what a lot of them talked about was he built up the anticipation.
Mm.
So, for example, we're talking about arousal for 45 minutes. If you come up behind your woman in the kitchen and like squeeze her butt a little bit and like kiss her neck and then walk away, right? Well, now she might be a little aroused. Or if you give her a really good compliment and you're looking in her eyes and you're grounded and you're present when you say it, you look great in those jeans. Oh, well, now her little neurons are going to be firing. So the 45 minutes doesn't all have to happen between the sheets, for example, but there needs to be a ramp up, right? And then
Yeah.
you
I
get to
like that.
you get to know your car, and you guys all know your cars change over time. My car is actually falling apart. But things change over time. And that can be part of the fun. And I think especially with things like the debrief, you want to know like what worked, what didn't work. Was there anything you wanted more of? I talk a lot about winning questions, meaning you want questions that aren't binary. So if you ask things like, is that good? Right? A lot of guys will ask me things like, is that good in bed? There's a lot of pressure for me to say yes. There's a lot of pressure. I feel like I can't really be like, no. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what he wants to hear in that moment. I can't tell you how many women talked about things like killing the mood. I didn't want to kill the mood. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to kill the mood. What we want is more open-ended questions, right? So how's that pressure? Is a question that's going to get you some kind of response that's useful versus just kind of like, is that good? Is that working? You know, you want to be asking different kinds of questions, and you want to be really present. When you're really present, you can track things like her breath. I have this really great quote from a man who took the course. I'm not going to read the whole quote, but basically he said, I used to think that I was pretty good at oral, but I didn't really get a lot of response from women. And I did the things in the course, and wow, I got a lot of different kinds of moans. Like this time I heard a lot of different kinds of moans that I hadn't heard before. You're going to start to get different cues when you slow down and you use less pressure and you build over time rather than going by the porn script, which is where I think a lot of men are learning about sex these days. I've done that, asked that question as well. And that's going to lead you astray because a lot of the porn that's out there, like I said, when real women watch it, they're kind of like, ow, not that I wouldn't want that, but I wouldn't want that right away.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've often coached our guys on is to have the like, hey, so what are your turn-ons conversation on a date, on a date. So not in the bedroom. Before you get to the bedroom, like, yeah, tell me about your turn-ons, which is fun and sexy and playful. You're going to learn a lot about her. You're going to get to share yourself. And that's kind of a lead into, yeah, and like, you know, just talk about sex. You know, how many partners have you had? When was the last time you were tested? I'm sorry, not how many partners have you had? I always ask,
What body
when,
count on the first date?
when was the last time you were tested and how many partners have you had since then? I personally like to know that, but you can kind of intro the sexy time conversation when you're not in the bedroom already. And then at that point, you're having that conversation. You can say also, you know, I don't know if we're going to get sexy later. I would love to, but I just want you to know there's no pressure on my side. I don't need us to do anything or go anywhere or have it, you know, go all the way or anything like that. And I always want to know if something doesn't feel good or hurts whenever we're doing sexy time. I always want to know. I'm here for it. You know, setting the stage, inviting her from the get-go. First of all, you're going to stand out because most men don't do that. They don't have this they don't lead this conversation, and they definitely don't say something like that. And secondly, you're going to get some really valuable information and you're kind of going to set the stage. In my course, I talk about it as kind of like a pussycat, like trying to get a pussycat to come inside. How are you going to get a pussycat to come inside? You're going to stay outside. You're going to make yourself safe. You're going to, you know, leave out some milk. Like that's kind of the process of getting her to open up sexually, is really making it safe and inviting her in, repeatedly inviting her in. That's what's going to have her actually open up rather than like a lot of my especially my married clients. I'll say, have you talked about sex? And he'll say, yeah, I asked her what she wanted or what she liked. And I'm like, that's not going to work. It's going to be a longer process than that. It's going to take more time to coax her out and invite her forward. One of the major qualities of a man who's good in bed is access to both light and dark sexual energy. I have some quotes from the research around this. This tracks, by the way, with the heart cock matrix. So some guys will have a lot of heart energy and not a lot of cock energy. And cock energy it's penetrative. I mean, obviously it's penetrative. I mean, it's directive. It's, you know, some people will call it masculine, but it's more like assertive, dominant, that kind of energy. And women really want men who have access to both. So this is how it shows up in the sex research. This is if a man has too much dark energy. She'll say things like he was like a poker, basically a jackrabbit. He was too forceful or rough. You're not a jackhammer and you're actually hurting me. Driving in too soon, being too fast or rough. But this is what women said about the opposite, which is too much light sexual energy. I needed him to be rougher. It felt like I was making love to my sister. Be more assertive. I won't break. Don't be so shy. I want you to ravage me. I need dominance. So one of the qualities of a really good lover is access to both of those kinds of energy, being able to lean in to both of them as the moment calls for. So some moments you're going to want to bring more of that assertive, dominant, taking energy. And she's going to want that from you. And in other moments, she's going to want more of the connected, lovemaking, looking into her eyes, all of that. It's not about only one or the other. It's about energetic agility and being able to go into both of these places. That's why I'm so passionate about the heart cock matrix, because you really want both of those energies online in order to really, really please her. That honestly comes back to presence. The man being really present in his body and having really done his embodiment work. When you've done your embodiment work, you're more in touch with yourself and your desires. And that's part of what she wants from you is I want to feel your desire for me. I want to feel your lead. And if you're in your head and you haven't done your embodiment work yet, it's going to be harder for you to lead me. So I would say deep embodiment work, that's the way. Such a good question. God. Yeah, so I think similar to what I was saying about leading the conversation about sex before you're in the bedroom, I would actually create a space to talk about sex with your partner that is mindful. Like, hey, why not just have a talk about sexy time? I'd like us to go to brunch on Sunday and talk about sexy time. How does that sound? So that it's a container and it's not just about that one moment, but you can go back to that moment and say, I'm just curious, like what was going on for you in that moment? Because then you're going to get an answer. I mean, it's possible that she might get defensive. I don't know your partner. But when you create a mindful space and you bring genuine curiosity, you tend to get different answers. And it's not, well, why not in the moment? Because in the moment, she's more likely to get defensive. But if you make it a broader question and again, kind of invite her forward, like, tell me more, like, when are you in the mood? Or, you want to kind of make it a dialogue and get to know her more and get to know her, again, her turn-ons, because turn-ons change over time. Things change in relationships. So creating a space to actually have a dialogue about it and understand more of like, what are your turn-ons these days? Here are some of mine. Like making it a conversation, I think is going to be helpful. And I just want to offer compassion because initiating is hard. Initiating is hard. And I think that a lot of women don't realize how hard it is because we're often the recipients. And I'm not just talking about sexual initiation, but initiating in general, going after what you want, asking is hard. And if there was anything, I just wish that I could convey that to more women about how much of a risk it is and how vulnerable it is to ask. So I just also want to offer compassion because getting turned down sucks, especially if you don't know why.
Melanie, can you maybe just even expand just a little bit? Let's say you're in a longer term relationship and because I've just been listening to this for 40 years from different relationships. And over time, everything's just shut down around sexuality. And anything the man tries is seemed like an affront to the woman. Maybe even trying to have a conversation. Maybe even saying, let's go to brunch and talk about sexy time. What do you suggest if the woman is just, we're not going to talk about sex. Sex is, maybe she feels like she's been hurt too many times. Maybe she has her own wounding or trauma. What do you recommend? I mean, do men just live with that? Is it time to move on? If
I do not recommend that men just live in a relationship where they're not getting their needs met. That's not okay. Don't stay in a relationship where you're not getting your needs met. I've worked with men and couples over the years. And one thing that I've observed is that there are times when it's time to see someone, right? You got to get someone involved. You got to see
you
a
mean a
sex
therapist, not another lover.
No, a therapist.
Okay, okay. Well, I mean, both might work, who knows?
A therapist, a coach, a counselor, you want to get someone else involved because I was just talking to my friends who's a sex therapist about this the other day. Often there are little hurts, little resentments,
Always.
basically always over the course of the marriage that are affecting how open she feels. And that's not about sex. It's about the relationship and it has to be
Yeah.
brought to light. And it can be, and it can work. It's not hopeless. But yeah, I'm sure you have all these conversations all the time as well, but I often have conversations with men about how to say to a partner, I need us to get help. This
Yeah,
is
that's
so important.
leadership.
Yes, this is so important to me that it's affecting my sleep. It's affecting I need us to go see someone. Here's someone I found. Here's someone I think might be good. There's a lot to be said for that. And if your partner isn't open to seeing someone with you, that's a problem. You're going to need to
Yeah.
evaluate and maybe work with your own counselor or mentors around what kinds of choices you're going to make from that place. Because what I don't want to see is men staying in relationships where they're not getting their needs met and they're just suffering.